Hi guys, and welcome to a very different sort of video. The first piece of sort of original content I've made for this channel, but it's a question I get asked a lot on stream, and I did make a video about it last year, but I don't think it was as concise, and I don't really do the same thing anymore, so I thought I'd make an updated version of the exact way that I set up databases for FM. Now, if you have any questions about this, of course, drop them in the comments, or you can check out my streams. I stream on Tuesday, Thursday, and at the weekends as well over on Twitch. Link in the description. Hope to see you over there. Now, in theory, one of the main prohibitive factors about loading lots of players and leagues on FM is it will tend to slow your computer down. No matter how fast it is, eventually you're going to reach a tipping point where you've got too many leagues turned on and it just becomes painfully slow, and it's prohibitive to your enjoyment of the save. But of course, you want to have those leagues switched on because the clubs are producing regens, which then makes your save more depth and more rich, and you can sign players from interesting nations. It also allows those other nations to have more competitive teams when you come to European competitions and whatnot. And there is a way that you can load players without loading the leagues themselves. And one of the main things that slows down saves is the processing time taken to actually produce those fixtures for those leagues. Now, view only has definitely brought some of that down a little bit, but I believe that this method still will reduce the amount of time that it takes to process between games, while still allowing you to have 100,000 players, sometimes even more depending on your computer, turned on and be able to have those nations produce regens. And that's the main thing. So I'm going to show you exactly how we do that now. Shouldn't be too long. Let's get stuck in. So obviously, when you go to start a new game, you want to start a new career. You pick your team, whatever, we move on. It's this screen where the magic happens. Now, you can load as many leagues as you want on this screen, of course, but bearing in mind, of course, the more leagues you load, the slower it will be. So let's just say that we're doing a Dutch team. So obviously the first thing I would do would be to turn these other ones off. Although actually, since I've selected Fulham, we will not be doing that. So let's just say I'm doing England. So naturally, we'll want leagues turned on down a certain way just for depth and to give you some enjoyment of the actual nation itself. But in so doing, you'll have turned off basically every other nation. They won't produce that many regens. The major clubs will still do it from time to time, but you'll end up with a very small database. So I'm starting off building this from a large database perspective because that will just add the key things that you want. But then you add stuff on top of that using the advanced settings, and that's in here. Now, you can be as granular as you like with this, but I generally speaking like to use continents as a good base point to build from. So obviously, if we're managing in Europe, the chances are we're going to want Europe switched on. Now, before, I would just have all of these ticked. And the problem with that is quite simply, if you do the players based in nation, you'll see it will immediately dump in 250,000 players, nearly, which is just too many teams producing players that you're never ever going to want. And that's the key thing that I think that is better this time around. So don't have that switched on unless you are absolutely mental, basically. Current international players is good. It will give you a nice little base. Players of nationality, not really that important either, really. What you want is players from top division clubs and players from top clubs. That's the big sides in Europe, as well as the top division clubs in every single European nation. And that will give you a nice spread of all the big clubs from every single nation that could produce potentially good players over the course of a save. And I also like to sometimes tick on players from continental competitions. It doesn't actually make any difference with this one, but sometimes it might do in the future. And then you just sort of keep going. South America, pretty much the exact same thing. Add those players in, and the number down here should slowly start ticking up. So you get all the big South American nations. You could maybe get away with a few extra ones here, just to top up, because South America is a bit of a nebulous one anyway, so you can get away with a few more in South America. Africa is always brilliant for producing young players, so topping those up as well gets us to around about 75k. And I usually like to turn Asia on as well, because again, there's often some interesting players you can find, and that sort of brings us to around about 95,000 players. So if we go okay here, you'll notice that the game is like, this will vary based on your computer, of course. The game is telling me that this is a bad idea and you should turn back now before you fall off the cliff. But it is important to remember that this number here, or this graphic, is not calculated based on the actual processing time it would take to run this save. This stat here is purely based on the number that's up here. Now, that's a general rule of thumb, is a pretty good thing to use. However, since they were actually just loading the players and not the leagues, you can kind of take this with a pinch of salt. I'd run my Tromsø save on Twitch with 100 and something, I think it's just over 100,000 players switched on, give or take. And that seems to work completely fine. There's no noticeable slowdown. You're normally pretty good. And that's with a lot of players switched on. I do only have Norway loaded on that one. So if this is the type of save you're interested in doing, I would suggest doing this, quite frankly, because it will make speeding things up a lot easier. The game will run a lot smoother, and you still get the exact same experience. Now, obviously, if you're planning on moving clubs, even then, you could still do this, because you could turn on other nations midway through the save and then just turn it off afterwards. So you should still be able to get away with it. There's very few situations when this wouldn't be beneficial for you, frankly. Now, obviously, you are going to want this stuff to be switched off. This is just from me doing tests in the past. And that's really all there is to it. Enjoy your saves, I would say. So if you have found this video useful, drop a like on it. That would be most fantastic. If you're new to this content of mine, hey, subscribe. We do the Twitch highlights come up on here as well. And I'm going to make more sort of this type of content for this channel as well. So that's awesome. And I hope to see you over on Twitch as well. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you soon. Hold your gun. Capybara. Bye-bye.